been 35 years since television came to New Zealand, and many of us, if we cast our minds back, can vaguely remember what life was like before then. It was quite nice, actually, but many of our young people, they can't remember at all. And for them, flicking a switch and seeing instant news and documentaries and drama, whatever, from all around the world is as natural to them as raiding the fridge. Television, when it came, ended our isolation. It brought us closer to the world. So now, instead of having to wait weeks, for example, for the Queen's coronation, to see the coronation at the picture theatres and the newsreels, now you just sat back on the lazy boy and it came at you. Now, if you came here from England or the United States after World War II or in the early 1950s, you would have found a small, picturesque, robust country, one that seemed to have everything, but it didn't have television. And you might have been amused at the experimental efforts during the 1950s.
In his Auckland backyard, Mr. Les Hunter, a member of the Institute of Electronics, has built a small television station.
Closed-circuit demonstrations went around the country. In stores and studios, you could see a footwear commercial, zoo animals, a Maori performance, singing, or you could see a cooking demonstration by Aunt Daisy, all of it on closed-circuit television. Yes, television was an idea whose time had come for us. Buoyed by public interest, the government prepared to launch television. June 1, 1960 was the appointed day.
So it was enormously exciting, of course. I mean, that's an overworked word, but it was. There was an enormous buzz, and people were very interested in it.
Auckland people saw the first broadcast. Whole streets crowded into the homes of neighbours lucky enough to have a TV set to watch the 2-hour programme kicked off by The Adventures of Robin Hood. Yes, the Auckland Star called it a dignified, successful entry and thoroughly professional. What they knew about profession, I don't know. But anyway, the 2 live presentations, songs by the Howard Morrison Quartet and Ian Watkins interviewing British ballerina Beryl Gray, they described as outstanding. Been a long time since television had such high praise in the newspapers. However, the reviewer did find very distracting the glitter from Miss Gray's jewellery and the reflection from the Howard Morrison Quartet's hair oil. To get this newfangled television, you paid a £4 licence fee and between £135 and £185 for your set. Unsurprisingly, people outside of Auckland also wanted television, so they formed television societies to lobby for coverage.
They still hope that the NZBC professionals will finish the job.
During the next 2 years, Dunedin, Wellington and Christchurch viewers were progressively tuned in. The licence fee rose to £6.10. Advertising was introduced.
Are you bothered with snow when you watch TV? Troubled with ghosts? Is your picture all stretched or squashed?
Could be your set is old or just plain tired.
By 1963, over 250,000 of us were hooked on television.
Hey, Mr. General Public, do you realize that we got a generation here of staring eyes? The women never bother getting housework done. They just sit around talking at television.
TV is just a waste of money.
You don't know what you're missing.
Television, television, I'm sick of looking on television.
I got the weak in the eyes, weak in the head likewise, from sitting and looking on. Sing it again, on television, television.
And now we had our favourite shows.
Oh, I got the weak in the eyes, do you know what likewise, from sitting and looking on television.
Some of which we're still watching. Initially, most of our news was overseas news, and it was a week old by the time we saw it. But local news gradually crept into our bulletins.
There's been heavy traffic congestion on the main road south of Dunedin today.
When you look back, it was very much radio with pictures. In fact, our first announcers came from radio, and they had very Englishy voices. They were very posh.
£7,000 to carry out an improvement programme.
The settlement of the key question of this country's dairy exports.
To be an announcer, you would have to learn to speak French and Maori and German, not necessarily understand it, but at least be able to pronounce it. And that was all done, really, in the name of respect. Respect for the viewer, respect for the audience in the radio. And, of course, some of us, as young people who want to do, overdid it a bit. But I thought I sounded lovely.
Through regional programs such as Town and Around, we began to see ourselves on a regular basis from 1965. Produced in the four main centres, the Town and Arounds began to reinforce our sense of community.
Well, I'm slightly damped.
These regional programs were a great training ground for many television staff who went on to run national television. Technically, they were rough and ready and they were experimental, but they conveyed a sense of fun too.
Tragedy today in Wellington Harbour. The inter-island ferry Wahine foundered off Port Dorset with 744 passengers and crew aboard. There's been serious loss of life.
Our television news came of age the day the Wahine went down in 1968.
The newsroom on the day of the Wahine, nothing like that had ever happened so close to the main television and radio newsroom before in the history of this country. It had this most extraordinary effect. And we did have, I think, on that day, a very calm news editor on who said, let us wait and see. And whilst people were shrieking hysterically about hundreds of people dying, he kept calm and was able to come out with a true figure which, though awful, would alleviate some of the agony that people out amongst the viewers and the listeners would have been suffering.
Their news coverage won a World News Film Award.
We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour.
Before television, we might have felt left out of world events, but a mere 9 years after our first broadcast, we all watched one of the great feats of our time, the moonwalk.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We didn't have a network when the moonwalk took place, but the technical staff somehow contrived to put together a network link. God knows how they cobbled it together, but they managed for that occasion to get a link right through the country. We couldn't see an American satellite in those days, but the Australian Air Force could. And they had a plane in the air over there, taking a feed from the American satellite, pictures of the moonwalk as it was happening, bringing it back to, I think, a Melbourne Air Base, or Richmond Air Base from memory, I think, putting the video or the film onto a Canberra bomber, you may remember those, which flew across the Tasman, dropped it to a ready waiting police escort into the studio that was put together in Wellington, and it was played, what, a couple of hours after it actually happened? That's amazing.
With network news, everyone in the country could see the same news at the same time, read by Bill Todd.
Social security benefits is expected from the government.
Or Philip Sherry.
The westward moves by the communists.
Or Dougal Stevenson.
Again been poaching in New Zealand waters.
From the beginning of television, most of our programs came from Britain and the United States. To balance this diet of imported fare, we started to make our own current affairs programs. Programs such as Compass in 1964 and Gallery in 1968 tackled the tough issues of the day.
Good evening. One of the major bills introduced in this session of Parliament was the Liquor Amendment Bill. This was yet a further attempt to broaden the licensing laws in this country, and particularly to liberalise our drinking hours.
It's a privilege to be...
And our politicians had to learn how to use the camera to their advantage.
You and I and all New Zealanders have it in our power to build a greater and a stronger nation. Another British nation down here in the South Pacific.
I'm going to deal with each of them one by one and show you that there is in fact no substance in all this material that you brought together with very great effort on your part.
Prime Minister, it's customary in an interview for the interviewer to ask questions and for them to be answered singly.
I'm not much interested in what's customary. This is a very important matter for New Zealand.
I agree, Prime Minister.
I want you to help me to clarify the issue.
Prime Minister, I would like to ask individual questions, and I would be grateful if you would answer them on an individual basis.
Well, of course I will, but you're not going to set the rules, my friend.
There was a mild paranoia about upsetting government. It had, broadcasting had a long and sort of proper tradition in this country, and television was a new medium and a little frightening. I mean, you can hide behind radio in a sense, but now you put faces out there. This is a little bit alarming because eventually those faces might, oh my God, become stars. People might actually like these. And then how do you control these people? So there was always felt, I think, by people in the upfront that they were leaned on, not heavily necessarily, but just slightly, enough to keep the personality subdued.
Prime Minister,
I will not have some smart aleck interviewer changing the rules of the game halfway through, Mr. Walker.
Prime Minister, I regret that we have run out of time. Nonetheless, thank you for your interview.
And some of them have subsequently been.
And for the first time, interviewers began to challenge rather than simply question interviewees.
None of what you have said tells me why I should believe you or why I should believe them. None of what you've told me tells me that.
I'm not asking you to believe me. I don't mind whether you do or not.
And those first probing current affairs programs generated a flood of mail and of phone calls. Viewers were, for the most part, upset, especially by this one.
Sure look forward to being down here with the New Zealand people and their upcoming fabulous event. Thank you very much for having me.
But would you be interested in apologising to Mr. Farr in public, Mr. Connor, for that incident that happened last year? It was not a very New Zealand thing to do, was it, I guess? I mean, it wasn't very polite to your guest, this confrontational style of interviewing. We weren't used to this approach. Then, of course. Another thing television in New Zealand did was end a lot of the isolation around the country. For farming folk especially, television connected them to the world beyond the farm gate. In 1966, they got their own program, Country Calendar.
Try working 2 gates and sorting for earmark, wool type and condition at the same time. It just takes a few years to stop making mistakes.
It linked town and country viewers. It became our longest running series, apart from the news. By now, our favourite imports included...
She's down! Touchdown! Touchdown! Dabba yabba dabba do time, a dabba do time, have a gay alright.
By 1969, Coronation Street had been on our screens for 5 years and was topping our ratings.
The honeymoon isn't the end of the story, it's only the beginning.
Of course, we also needed our own entertainers on television. And what better way to tap into our entertainers than to hold a talent quest and televise it? The first was Time Out for Talent, which launched the careers of Ray Columbus and Dinah Lee.
Come on and do the blue beat down to never be blue. Whoa, a tick, tang, tang. Have a shot, have a shot.
Hi there and welcome to Have a Shot. Have a Shot came along in 1962. It attracted 270 hopefuls strutting their stuff for the cameras.
Oh, lies, I love you, little lies, I love you. I love you in the springtime and the fall.
By 1964, the dynamic Peter Sinclair hit the screens hosting Let's Go, a weekly teenage show.
We've got to make this a show to remember.
But it was another Sinclair-hosted music show, Come On, that took our entertainment television into the real big time from 1967.
Show me a woman who's got a good man. Now show me.
In this one studio, at one end of the studio, there would be Peter Sinclair, his go-go dancers and his singers. At the other end of the studio, on another high platform, there would be the continuity announcer, there would be the newsreader and weather. And on the floor between us, there would be this masses of young people dancing to the go-go music. And how the director, the producer, and the camera people made sense out of this chaos was just remarkable.
And Come On launched a galaxy of new young stars. It went out live every Saturday evening, a fast, furious and frenetically paced showcase of New Zealand talent. It was a huge success. At one stage, the show received 1,500 fan letters a week.
Whichever witch, the wicked witch.
Then came the 1970s. In the 1970s, television moved into another phase of development. We got colour and we got our second channel. Now, this colour, woof, glorious colour, and it arrived just in time for our biggest sporting event in New Zealand to date, the Commonwealth Games in Christchurch 1974. Of course, most of us still had black and white sets then, but what did it matter? We had colour.
The girls are wearing a one-piece frock of red, white and blue diagonal stripes. It has short sleeves and a white roll collar, and they're carrying white shoulder bags and wearing white shoes. Good mod chunky heel styling on those shoes too.
But 12,000 families got to see those friendly games on their new coloured sets. And yes, for the first time, we got 7 hours of daily television coverage from the games, direct telecasts from 4 venues.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are very welcome. Television One is here at last.
In 1975, we joined the big league of television. We got our second channel. Now we had choice. In 1975, we got our second television channel, and the powers that be broke new ground by appointing Jenny Goodwin, their peak time newsreader.
I think they believed, and there'd be others who'd probably agree with me too, that women didn't have the same authority as men to read news on radio or television, wouldn't make the same impact as a male newsreader, but I believed that I was ready for that challenge.
And it could be tomorrow before helicopters can set foot on the crash site.
For a woman to read the news in peak time television, that's early evening network news, yes, I was the first one in the British Commonwealth, and I think the BBC followed suit a few months later.
And South Pacific Television ran the first telethon. This was a huge success, raising $500,000 for the St John Ambulance Training Centre, but the second one went on to raise $1.5 million.
You literally flew by the seat of your pants. I mean, there was in many instances, no scripts. And you never knew what was going to come next. You just had the director sitting next to you, giving you last-minute instructions, and you went for it.
Well, that telethon was a good effort, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, great effort, telethon. Oh, it's a...
I gave him $20.
Did you? What for?
All rolling gloomy kiss.
Oh, yeah, did it?
The evolution continued. We became comfortable seeing our New Zealand sense of humour expressed on the screen. A writing team burst on the scene with some witty and raunchy lines.
And tonight we answer the question that's on everyone's lips. Just what is Bill Rolling really like in bed?
And now an exclusive to a week of it, the Prime Minister getting a lay.
A week of it turned into a month of it and a year of it, and later turned into McPhail and Gadsby.
Unfortunately, we have no film of the bird, but it looked something like this.
But one of our most enduring comic heroes was the great Billy T. James.
See this? It's a modified Land Rover gearbox. And I'll tell you what, not only will this baby scoff up pork bones, fish heads and fish up cans, but if you drop a knife or a fork in it, you just slap it in the reverse and it'll split the bloody thing straight back out of it.
Drama was not a high priority in the early years. Starting from scratch as we did, we spent most of our money on developing the basics. By 1969, though, we had a major dramatic series, The Alpha Plan, with a cast of 120. Local drama reflected our rural lifestyle in series like Pukemanu.
Yes, well, she's had 3 miscarriages, poor child.
And close to home, our first soap opera, the forerunner of Shortland Street.
Haven't I seen you somewhere before?
And very interested we were too in our history, with The Governor and Hunter's Gold, both sold overseas. It had to be prized out of the governors, but television came increasingly to reflect Maori news and views, albeit sporadically to begin with. By 1982, though, we could watch the Maori language news program Te Karere.
Windows.
Our children weren't forgotten by television either. Play School. Hey, hey, it's Andy. And Nice One Stew kept many a mum sane in the afternoons.
At the bottom, what are you doing, boy?
I am writing a letter to myself, sir.
And what are you saying to yourself?
Well, I won't know that because I won't get the letter till tomorrow, will I?
Oh.
Television in those very early days The old black and white television had a rawness, it had a youth, it had a daring, and it showed us ourselves. Well, it still does, of course, except now it shows us the whole world as well. The whole world live, in your living room, press of a button. You don't even have to walk to the TV set anymore. You have it when you want it. And there's more of it coming. In 1989, the third channel came on the air, and now in some parts of New Zealand, you can select up to 10 channels, and that won't be the end of it either. But above all, television has recorded forever those special moments in our lifetime, and we'll leave you with a few of them tonight. That was the way we were.
Which word beginning with O is the general term for any living creature or plant?
Orgasm.
Correct.
I'm feeling it alive.
Last week, an estimated audience of 1.5 people.